But we're going to start the meeting at 6 p.m. Can I get a roll call?
Chair Zavala,
Here.
Vice Chair Ortiz.
It's right there.
Está viejito, déjalo solo.
Stay here.
Yo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One.
Here. Great. Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Ayala. Here. And Commissioner Mendoza. Here.
We're going to move on to C, the Pledge of Allegiance. Can you please rise?
Sure will. Ready? Begin.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to D, public comments from the audience regarding items not on the agenda. Do we have any comments online,
No comments,
emails, anything?
no emails.
Thank you. E, consent agenda, adoption of the February 6, 2024 Planning Commission minutes.
I just noted a typo on page 7. Referring to me as Chair Garcia. And sixth paragraph. And then at the end of that too. I see 2 instances. With that, I move to approve the minutes with those 2 corrections.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Can I get a roll call? Or all in favor?
Aye.
F, public hearings, we have none. Moving on to G, other business. Number 1, consideration of the city's role as an entitlement jurisdiction. Can I get a staff report?
Okay. Sounds good. All right, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission, Brent Slama, consulting planner for the city. And today we're talking about the fun world of CDBG entitlement jurisdiction. CDBG is the Community Development Block Grant Program. It's a program where the federal government funds opportunities for cities and jurisdictions, the county, to receive funds to do a number of great things for communities, build housing, build structures, build parks, build facilities. There's a lot of great uses for the CDBG program. The way it works is that if you are a city over 50,000 people, you get your money automatically. They just write you a check. For those of us that are below 50,000, like Greenfield, is that if you are a city over 50,000 people, wow, you get your money automatically. They just write you a check. For those of us that are below 50,000, like, is that if you are a city over 50,000 people, you get your money automatically. They just write you a check.
See what you did, Bob?
For those of us that are below 50. Sounds like when I'm on the radio sometimes and I get that 5-second tape, the delay in my ear, and I'll just wait. So if you are under 50,000, you are what's considered non-entitlement, which means you go after grants with a pool from others with competing against other cities like you that are under 50,000 in population. The other choice is to join a consortium, which is you band together with other jurisdictions and you become an entitlement jurisdiction through that consortium. So the city of Greenfield, a number of years ago, I think it was 9 years ago, chose to join a partnership that was led by Monterey County. Now, the county, when you take the unincorporated population, they have a higher threshold, and also they have to have enough low to moderate income residents. So the county joined together with the cities of Greenfield, Gonzales, and Delray Oaks to join this in this consortium, become an entitlement consortium. So you annually get a jurisdiction. Monterey County runs it. They do all the administration for you. They distribute funds. And if you looked at your staff report, you can see what that has been like since you have been an entitlement jurisdiction. So there's a table, if you have it, that was provided by the county. I want to make that clear. Exhibit A was provided by the county that shows kind of what the county's been involved with in terms on behalf of the city of Greenfield. What I want you to look at is, if you look at the Exhibit A, the second line shows the city CDBG allocation. In the past, you've used CDBG funds to fund the Little League concession building. You've used it for fire equipment, and you have a project pending to do sidewalk improvements on Walnut Avenue over the course of your funding. The reason that we're bringing this to your attention now is that the city council will be making a determination by this summer whether or not you wish to continue as an entitlement jurisdiction along with the county for this next cycle, the next 3 years. If you do that, basically you'll get an annual allocation. Your annual allocation is estimated to be around $250,000 a year. However, there's a lot of that goes away for admin purposes, activity delivery costs. Remember, the county is the one that administers the program. The county also, though, has said that by being a part of the consortium, that they can benefit Greenfield residents that go directly to the county for things such as business loans, down payment assistance, energy efficiency improvements. That's been probably the most subscribed program, as you can see. And then also access to the PLHA allocation. So multifamily construction assistance there. So that what that means, and that has to do with funds for homelessness. A lot of the cities, not just Greenfield, that's not a CDBG program, combined with the county and use their PLHA funds. It was just a matter of our jurisdictions are small. We don't have the administrative staff to support all these programs, and county has a lot of housing staff. They've also put some money towards Girls Inc. programs and other things. And these are things that are done at the county level. They're not administered through the city council. They're not run through the city staff. But because Greenfield is within this consortium, they can choose to move those monies. So the county controls all the money in this entitlement jurisdiction. You can continue in that partnership. It's kind of the bird in the hand scenario. You get an annual guaranteed amount of funding. It doesn't require a whole lot of work, and it's kind of fixed what you're going to get. And then you have to decide what your projects are going to be. As I mentioned, previous projects, the concession building, the fire equipment, and basically they're projects that help the public, benefit the public. Non-entitlement means that you go out on your own and you go secure your own grants. The upside to that is that they can be a lot more substantial. The downside is you got to do all the work yourself or hire staff to do it, or a consulting firm or something like that. If you look on Exhibit B, of the staff report. This is the most recent list of funding for non-entitlement jurisdictions. And as I mentioned, these are all communities under 50,000 or counties under 100,000 of unincorporated population. So you can see a lot of $500,000 grants, $750,000 grants, and then you get to the last page, and there's some pretty sizable ones in the millions of dollars for community centers and sewer projects and fire engines and, pretty big projects that can be funded through CDBG. Those, what are called OTC projects, generally take time to put together. You get put on a waiting list and you work really hard to put together a competitive application. All these grants are competitive, meaning that you have to apply for them and they get scored and ranked. And not all the time do they get funded. And every year you don't know how much money is going to be available in the pot for CDBG. This last year, the most recent numbers, as you can see for 2022, these were awarded in April of 2023. So next month, there'll be a new exhibit just like this. Will show how much communities got for the 2023 year. But the most recent one, 42 projects, $30 million in funding. So that kind of explains the two ways of going out and getting these grant funds. There's definitely pros and cons to each. This is really helpful if you have a project you're really looking for funding for and are looking for a kind of more money. The key to these projects is you can't go get another grant until you spent 50% of your existing grant. So unlike the entitlement jurisdiction money, which kind of rolls over from year to year and you can bank it for a while if you want, these, you can't get new grants until you've completed substantially your old project, over 50% of that. Every city chooses to do it a different way. As we mentioned, Greenfield is part of the consortium. Some other, so is Gonzales. The other cities in Salinas Valley are not, and they go competitively for grants. Both ways have worked. It's just a question of administrative support and what you feel and what are the projects you're looking to sort. The types of projects, if you look in your staff report, that you can go for. There's housing assistance, public improvements, community facilities, public services, planning and technical assistance. And there's a couple other categories that we don't really apply for, but economic development, funding, that type of thing. So that's kind of where we are. Like I said, this summer, we're coming for a decision. Kind of wanted to give you an idea of where we are. We can certainly, myself or Community Development Director can answer any questions that you might have about the CDBG entitlement program, or if you have any thoughts about what may be best for the city of Greenfield moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to open up public comments. Do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
Thank you. Moving on to C, Planning Commission discussion and comments. Commissioner Mendoza, do you have any comments?
No.
Commissioner Gallardo?
I don't have any comments. I have a question, so.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, would it be more profitable for the city to go after their own grants as opposed to being in the consortium? And if you do get into the consortium, how is the money sent to cities? I mean, does everybody get an equal share?
In terms of the consortium, so the amount that's sent by CDBG that goes to the county is per capita population. So the city of Greenfield gets more than Delray Oaks, for example, and probably twice as much as the city of Gonzales, just by the fact that you have twice the population. The county gets the bulk of it.
Okay.
The county's administering it. So the way it's worked in the past is basically you kind of have a budget, for activities, and then the city would go to the county saying, well, we want to do this, and then you got to check all the boxes to make sure that it qualifies, and then they're the ones that are control the purse strings. As I mentioned, the side to that is you have a pretty good idea what you're going to have to work with. The total allocation they're anticipating for this next cycle would be 250,000 or so a year. Part of that's taken out for administrative purposes, but you'd be looking at a $450,000 to $500,000 project that you would pursue. The non-entitlement is you could pursue, it will depend on, they give out every year what is called a NOFA, a Notice of Funding Availability, which is basically says, okay, you have 9 months, cities, to apply for a grant, and this is what you're eligible to apply for this year. And this is the amount of the pot. So in 2022, there was $30 million available. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot when you're spreading it around the state of California, but remember that you're only competing against jurisdictions that are in your size. You know, it's not LA, it's not San Francisco. These are smaller communities, and a lot of them already have active CDBG projects. Is it more beneficial? It can be if you have your plan together, your act together on what you're looking for. As I mentioned, the awards can be quite substantial. In my previous job, we're a non-entitlement community. We got a $1.9 million grant in 1 year. But that was a one-time deal. There's no guarantee. And, bird in the hand, two in the bush kind of scenario here. There's no right answer or a wrong answer. It's what's best for the community, what your needs are, and what your capacity is to go get those grants. I would put it that way.
So if the city of Greenfield decides to be into this consortium and the powers that be say, okay, this is how much you're getting. Can the city say, well, can you give us a little more? Or, I mean, it's dead set. This is the amount you're getting.
That would be a discussion to have with Monterey County.
Okay.
So they, as I mentioned, they run the programs. They have the ability, as being part of the consortium, as I mentioned before, to funnel money towards cities in the consortium. So they could fund more if Greenfield had more of a project. And for example, say Delray Oaks didn't have anything going on. It would be perfectly fine for them to increase the allotment or take allotment from the county, which they said they've done. I know the county would really like to see the cities that are in the consortium stay in the consortium for the next round, because without the other cities, there's no consortium. The numbers have to match a certain way, and Greenfield's a valued partner in that. So, as I mentioned, the biggest benefit is they do all the work, but your funding is going to be limited to that amount, and if you're okay with that, then that's the way that Greenfield's done this, I believe, for the last 3 cycles.
So if the city decided to go after it on their own for grant, will the grant be denied?
So what'll typically happen is, yes, so depending on the grant that you go for, it can be accepted, it can be denied, or it can be waitlisted. So if there's more, which often happens, there's more money asked for with these grants than there's funds available, they can hold them back. So last year, this funding that's on your staff report, those were all projects that were waitlisted before. Basically said, we've got so many projects that we're going to fund projects that we've already got in the, that we think are great projects. We just haven't had funding for it. So when I mentioned like those community center awards, those multi-million-dollar projects, those are projects that typically will take 3 to 4 years from when you get started with HCD to actually get the funding for it. But one grant like that, compared to $250,000 a year, could be, a lot more. It's just, there's no guarantee you're going to get that. And that's where the difficulty in the decision lies is, what are you going to get? A guaranteed amount versus trying for something more substantial. And that's where, it's hard. It's hard because you don't know what they're going to have. So the CDBG program gives money to non-entitlement jurisdictions. So there's going to be money available, but the state really controls what those funding are for. So I remember one time, my previous jurisdiction, we were looking for a public facility grant. The NOFA comes out for the year saying there's no public facility funding this year. It's like, okay, well, we're going to have to we had to turn our attention to business assistance loans, So whereas in the entitlement jurisdiction, you can spend on any eligible activity. You're going to get $250,000. So fit it in your budget. Hope that helps explain the differences, and
Well, does, yes.
I don't want to say for the city that one is better than the other. But I've had experiences with both of them, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garcia?
Yes, thank you for explaining some of the acronyms, but the OTC, what's coming to mind is over the counter. Is that not?
That is an over-the-counter grant, and the thing about an over-the-counter grant, as I mentioned, those are the ones, the big buck ones, those typically, it's an open deadline. It's not subscribed to you have to do this in a certain time. You submit the project to them, and then, like I said, they work with you for multiple years you don't get that one very fast.
Okay,
It's because those are pretty substantial grant awards where you've got a pretty defined project. And oftentimes you have other funding sources that are part of the puzzle too. And so sometimes you're contingent on getting that other funding before they fund those pieces.
okay. And then also, given the fact that I keep reading the headlines, how the state of California's budget deficit is in the billions of dollars. You indicate that the CDBG funding is guaranteed. Is that a budget notwithstanding or?
CDBG is a federal program. So the
Okay.
money is passed through to HCD, comes from HUD at the federal level.
Okay,
So to the extent that the federal budget still funds the program, the funding will be there. It's
Okay.
not a state issued
don't
program.
have-
Every state is required because CDBG funds go throughout the country. HCD for California just happens to be the ones that administer the non-entitlement jurisdiction funds.
okay. Yeah,
But there have been cuts at the federal level before at CDBG, so but
Yeah, I know,
for
you
this
don't have a
3-year
crystal-
period, it'd be as close to guaranteed as any government money would be.
and the same requirements for the entitled versus non-entitled are the same. It has to be a public. It has to be for the public, general
Mhm.
public, affordable
Mhm.
housing, infrastructure, public facilities. There's no difference there between an entitled jurisdiction and non-entitled.
No, the only difference is that sometimes, so on that list, an entitlement jurisdiction can use it on any CDBG activity. Non-entitlement jurisdictions are limited to whatever the grants that they're going for in the NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability is. And so if the state says we're going to focus all our energy on affordable housing, then you would have to apply for affordable housing activity. That's all they're going to fund because all these projects are based on merit. And so they're the judges on if your project's good enough or not. You get a bigger award, but there's no guarantee of funding.
And is this being presented to us to keep us in the loop? Or are we going to be making a recommendation to the council?
I'll defer that to the community development director, but definitely want to be in the loop because they'll be doing this. I mean, we'll be making a final decision on this by this summer.
Right. Well, I would like to go for more money, and not stick to the, consortium. If that matters, because we have some big needs in the community. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of the soccer field improvements. There needs to be lights out there. There needs to be a concession, restrooms. That's been being requested for at least 10 years, maybe. I'm thinking of the new community center that we have just purchased the land for, or is in escrow or whatever. I think that if we are to make a recommendation, I would say let's go for the bigger bucks, if the staff can find staff to do that. But I think they've been very successful in the past at getting grants, so I have high hopes. Full faith.
Thank you for that. Vice Chair, thank you, Liz. Do you have any comments? Okay, I just have a question. So it's 250, the annual allocation is 250 a year, right?
That's prior to any administrative expenses that the county will take off the top. That's just the allocation that you get based on population that comes from the federal government.
And we've received this for the last 3 cycles?
About 9
Oh,
9 years. So the total, if you look at the table, is 2.2 million and change. It says that's been eligible for funding. So the commitment would be for another 3-year cycle.
All right. So I don't think we have any more comments or questions, no? Okay, thank you for that, Brad.
Okay.
Mr. Megan, do you have anything to add or?
The only thing I would add is if there could be a consensus really for a recommendation to the city council. We're either going to recommend to the city council that we stay and remain as an entitlement jurisdiction, or as Commissioner Garcia pointed out in her thoughts, that we sever that relationship and become a non-entitlement jurisdiction. And then we would allow the city council to make the final decision. But your input is very valuable, exactly along the lines as such Commissioner Garcia mentioned. Are we, Mr. Slum is correct. There's no right answer here. Is it the sense of community leaders, you and the city council, to take our chances in the competitive market with others and try and compete for larger dollars, or join the consortium as we have been for a number of years? And, we would probably have to return to the planning commission to really assess how successful that has been. During the years I was the director of the redevelopment and housing department, we routinely applied for and were awarded home grants and CDBG grants on an annual basis. That was a different time. That was, over a decade ago. But it worked well for the city during a 5-year period of time. That department put approximately $7 million into the community. And we ran programs that included first-time home buyer program, residential rehabilitation programs, business assistance programs for small things, awnings, paint jobs, things like that. And so there a lot of money went into the community when we did it on our own. We are probably a less competitive jurisdiction today than we were a decade ago. In the last 4 years, we've increased the value of the city by $274 million, according to LAFCO. This is indicative of the significant development that's been ongoing. So it's really a question of, well, as Mr. Slama said, are we content to just take our smaller amounts and do what we will with that money, or can we continue a record, what has a pretty solid record of writing and landing strong CDBG grants and home grants? And your recommendation would be something we would just forward to the planning, to the city council. And I would, if others have an opinion on that way, it's, one way or the other. And so we appreciate your recommendation, Commissioner Garcia, because it helps us formulate our position. It really is the choice of the leader, your leadership, as to which way we go. And it's really rooted in, well, what question are you asking? Is it, well, which way can you get more money? Well, the odds are pretty strong that we probably could receive more money on the other side, on the non-entitlement jurisdiction side. On the other hand to that is that we had 2 staff persons dedicated to that effort. When we were successful in obtaining those grants, we had a housing specialist and somebody to handle administration because the reporting on these grants never goes away. Program income is reportable to HUD every year, forever, I think. And what dynamic we found quite interesting is that it doesn't always go well. Before we get to the Tom Rogers Museum agenda item, sometimes we can put $1 million in the community and residential rehabilitation projects for residents to have minor projects to spiff up their personal residence. It doesn't always go well. Sometimes the property owner is displeased by the quality of the construction, or they painted the wrong color, or so you have the normal challenges in a construction project that you would find normally. The point I'm trying to convey is that it's not all just terrific either way. Sometimes you can have 20 clients that are all mad at you because it wasn't as good as they expected it to be. But it's a grant. On the other hand, like I said, we put in a 5-year period of time about $7 million in home and CDBG grants when we were a non-entitlement jurisdiction. And I don't think you can say the same or anything comparable in the last 5 or 6 years that we've been in an entitlement jurisdiction. That said, we're a valuable member of the consortium, and it would be a real loss to the county. We have a relationship with the county, and we have had, we do have smaller projects that are awarded to us. I think that's about all I can say.
Thank you. So do we, aside from Commissioner Garcia's recommendation, do we have any other recommendations?
Let me ask you, Mr. Morgan. Now, I was able to catch everything you said. I neglected to bring my hearing aids. Plead guilty. If the city chose to go after on its own, did you say the city has to hire a grant writer? Or is that someone within the current administration will do that?
We would most likely hire a grant writer, a professional grant writer, and we would be reimbursed if we were awarded the grant for the cost of that grant writer.
Okay.
We have experience to write the grant. I wrote one of the grants with a little bit of help. I know Mr. Slama has probably come really close to writing a grant, if not doing so. So the better it's written, the more experienced people that you have who do this year after year after year, the higher of likelihood you have of scoring well.
So if you hire a grant writer, you have better odds of getting the grant as opposed to.
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other recommendations? Yep. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna move on. Oh, so we're gonna recommend, I agree with Commissioner Garcia. I think this is a really good idea. I didn't even know about the Little League concession came from this, so that's awesome. I like that. Okay, that's it. Well, then moving on to number 2, report from city staff on ongoing development projects and activities. Can I get a staff report?
Is this on? Can you hear me? Hey, good evening, planning commissioners. I have for you a pretty brief staff report on some ongoing development projects and activities. I know you all have questions about projects you've approved and projects happening in the city. And I know you get questions a lot from residents asking, when is this gonna be done? What's happening with this? And trust me, so do we. So I thought it'd be good to update you on some of the major projects or the ones that we get asked about the most. So this isn't intended to be an in-depth dive into any of these, just kind of a quick update to show that there is progress, even when it isn't as fast as we'd like it to be or when it doesn't seem like it. There's a lot of movement on a lot of these projects. So we can just go down this list together and we can talk through it a little bit. So for residential projects, I'm sure you've all seen the Magnolia Senior Apartments Phase 2 has been completed. So they should be moving people in pretty soon. Waitlist is open and I provided the leasing information at the end of this report in case, anyone asks about how they can get access to this. Greenfield Commons, you've probably seen the modulars being transported around town. It's pretty cool if you haven't. Stop by any given day, you might see them coming through Walnut. We contacted the project manager for that, and we do have a estimated completion and move-in date of May 2025, which seems really far away, but it's really just over a year. And for 100 units, it's not so bad. So that's in the works, moving quickly. The Walnut Place apartments, those are also in the final stages of construction. Just a few more things they need to take care of, and they should be ready to move people in also later this year. The People Self project, which you recommended for approval to the city council, I think some of you were there actually. City council approved it. So we'll be getting a new subdivision of single family homes. So if you know anyone who's interested in building their own home, they do have their interest list available online now, so people can start registering for that. And I provided that link at the end of the report as well. A couple other residential projects that we haven't heard of in a while, but they're in different stages. Tyler Avenue Townhomes, we'll be getting 8 new townhomes over on Tyler and El Camino. So that'll add some much needed housing. And the Woodridge subdivision just down the street, actually, 47 unit townhome project that should be submitted for building permit review soon. You have their master plan approved, so it's really any day now. Moving on to some commercial projects. So we contacted for the travel center, the gas station, and the new restaurants. Their estimated completion date as of last week is still April of this year. So we'll see how that goes. But they're optimistic that they'll get it done by then. For 229 El Camino, I know that we had some questions about that last time, the tap house. We did speak to the owner and they're also in the final stages. They're just doing their tenant improvements and they'll be moving forward with the tap house on one side and I believe a barber shop on the other. So that is in the works. A project that's also expected to be presented before you soon is for 201 El Camino. This is the Buyer building. It's the intersection of, I think, what is it? Oak and El Camino in front of Fast Trip. That building sat abandoned for some time now and they've had some code enforcement issues, but it's been sold and the owner intends to have an application before you soon. And they are intending to continue with the mixed use of store on El Camino and some residential on top. So we'll see how we can make that work. Here at the counter, our permit technicians are very busy. This is a typo. This should say 35 building permits since the start of the year, along with the dozens of other permits they process every day. So we have really almost like 100 permits that they're actively moving forward every day. So they are very, very busy and we are very grateful for them. Another major project that the city is working on right now is the annexation of 2 9-acre parcels. So city's currently working with LAFCO to annex 18 acres. This is home to the K6, the Rio Seco Academy, and to the new community center. So that is in the works. Housing reports. So yeah, a lot of that. So these are reports that once completed we'll probably present them to you. The annual progress report, which I think, we've presented before, just tracking the goals towards the housing element. Also the housing element is currently under review. I won't talk too much about that because I know it's on the agenda. CDBG, we just heard about, also a major priority right now. Some other stuff happening right now are some proposed ordinances, including the rental registration, which you've heard about before. And you'll hear about more today, so that one's always fun to discuss, and some potential zoning updates. We're currently working on getting some reports for you for some proposed changes potentially to our downtown parking standards and mixed use standards. So those are things that you should expect to hear about soon. Most recently this Friday, we had an event, Coffee with Community Development. So we've been trying to be more active and engage with the community to show that if they have questions, they should come to us, anything building, planning, community development related. So it was here. We had a few people come in, and we hope to make it more of a regular thing. So people kind of know where they can come find us at the same time every month or every other month. So that was great. It's always good to hear what community members have to say because they often do have questions about what's being built, what is that, how do I get access to that? So that was a good event. And then at the very end, I just provided some leasing information because I know we get a lot of questions about how people can access these new multifamily projects, and I'm sure you do too. So these all have like websites or phone numbers posted, and feel free to use this to refer people to these projects. Yeah, that concludes my report really. Just some quick updates. If you have any questions, go ahead.
Thank you for that. Be open. Public comments, sorry. Do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
The planning commission discussion and comments. Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Ms. Mesa, for this report. I know we've been asking about these projects at various times and usually at the end of the meeting. So it's really good to see this all condensed into this report. I just want to note that as many requests that we get over and over, even from up here, that we have more affordable housing. This reflects that we have 226 units of affordable housing that's being built and 55 I assume market rate. So I appreciate that we're balancing that and moving more towards market rate housing. I remember this Tyler Avenue Townhome project back in 2018, so they're moving forward with that. I don't remember if there were if it was going to be affordable or market rate. I'm assuming it's market.
I
So
think so, yeah, probably have to double check that.
yeah, I remember that project. It's going to be right by the high school on the corner.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because I think when they came, we mentioned, it would be, something for teachers to look at maybe. We're very excited about the tap house. And as far as the Buyer building, you mentioned that the new owner is going to continue with the mixed use. In the meantime, that broken glass, the broken windows, that's probably a code enforcement thing, I realize, but it's been that way for a long time. And it really doesn't look good. And thank you finally for the links at the end, because we do get questions a lot, and especially on these items, the housing. So I'm going to be happy to pass that on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Urquidez.
Well, I just have one comment. We're having right over here in the corner of Reed and Delatory, and not Delatory, De Leon. There, the road is getting chewed up so bad that it's just mud now. I mean, with asphalt, it's pretty well gone. And it's a lot of potholes there. And we need to get something fixed there, because there's too much traffic going through there. And it's just tearing up the road.
Sorry, what was that intersection again?
Reed and De Leon. That's all there.
Thank you. Commissioner Gallardo?
Yeah, I have to agree with Commissioner Garcia that the Myers building that's an eyesore. That's something needs to get done. And like she mentioned, it's probably code enforcement can do something about that. I'd like to see them do something about it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Mendoza.
Do we know if this Tyler Avenue and the Woodridge, are those for sale or are those gonna be rentals?
I believe I know for a fact that Tyler Avenue is gonna be rentals. I'd have to double check on the Woodbridge since that one we are expecting the building permit to come in soon, but the last I heard of it, I just reviewed their master plan, so I haven't looked into that any further really, but I can get back to you guys with answer on that.
That's it.
So, the Tap House, is that the name? Do they have a name yet for?
They don't have a name yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm hoping they'll have a signed permit submittal soon and we'll see the name on there.
Okay. And then the coffee with the community development, what time was that?
That was from 10 to 12.
So it's during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that on social media?
Yeah, it was on
was-
social media and then we posted it around town in a few locations. Yeah, we're experimenting with different days and times to see kind of what the best time is to get people to come out.
Okay. Was it on the Greenfield Facebook page? I probably
I
missed
think
it.
so, right?
Okay. And did you say you have another date for the next?
We're still deciding on how often we want to do them, but we figured if we make them kind of at the same time every month, people know to expect it.
Okay.
So that's still to be determined, but we'll update you guys.
I really like that idea. I see a lot of comments on social media asking, and so, it's great that they can ask the right people the questions to
Yeah.
get the right answers. So that's great. Okay. I think that's it for me. Okay, thank you.
So thank you.
Number 3, status update on the Tom Rogers Visitor Center. Can I get a staff report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Hopefully this item will be brief because there's not a lot to report. You may recall that last August, the Cemetery District approached the city to gift a building of 1,400 to 1,800 square foot building to the city for the purpose of citing a Tom Rogers Museum or Visitor Center or some venue to house the artifacts of the first mayor of the city, Tom Rogers. Really, the large delay to date has been the weather of all things. Initially, it was believed that the foundation that accompanied that came with the pre-manufactured building would suffice as a permanent foundation at the location in Hicks Park in Greenfield. That turned out not to be the case. Upon recommendation by the building official, we require a permanent foundation. So as a result of that, we had to go back to the drawing boards, get an architect, design a foundation, and that has been approved by the building official. Construction on that foundation can't begin until we have about a 30-day window of at least dry weather forecast. And we think that we've seen the last of the rain today or tomorrow. And so the construction contractor, Leduca, is geared up to begin the site work and construction of the site and the foundation. In the meantime, the building is scheduled to be transported from UC Santa Cruz to the city at any time. The transporter now is only awaiting for their Caltrans permit for the hauling oversized load. Once that is awarded to the transporter, the building will be transported to the Public Works to the city facility until really until the concrete is cured in the foundation. And once that's done, we'll lift it up and continue on with the projects. But we've been in kind of a delay, not a kind of, but we've been in a delay mode for 4 months because of this. And you may recall the city council appropriated $219,000 for the project, and we're already $130,000 over budget because of the foundation issue. So we're going to go back to the city council and ask for a supplemental appropriation, and hopefully they'll agree that it's worth it. But we've had recurring and regular meetings with Tom Rogers Committee, which is a public benefit corporation, nonprofit corporation. So they're ready to, they've inventoried their treasures, their artifacts, and they're ready to go. And we're just really waiting on the weather of all things.
Okay, thank you. Be open. Do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
I'm going to close public comments. C, Planning Commission discussion and comments. Commissioner Garcia?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about the budget. So at the beginning of your memo, it indicates that 212,000 was needed for transportation from UC Santa Cruz to Greenfield. And then on the last page of the report, it says the committee and the city council approved funding not to exceed 219,937. Is that in addition to the 212 transport or include?
No, I'm sorry, must be a typo
Oh.
because there was 219,000
Okay, good.
is what they appropriated.
And then there's probably another 150,000 for costs associated with permit requirements and the foundation and
Probably.
Okay,
Probably.
all right. So when it's moved to the public works storage yard, how's it gonna get moved over there?
By crane, By
Oh,
crane.
so,
the same company who,
the same company?
yeah,
Okay,
that's constructing the foundation is taking care of the transportation also.
I was gonna say, maybe you could borrow EAH's, they have a bunch out there down the street. That's all I have.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kivas? Commissioner Gallardo?
Yeah, is it a multi-unit or is it just a single unit? The building,
It's in 2 pieces.
it's in 2 pieces.
Yes,
A multi-unit.
yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Commissioner Mendoza? No. Thank you. All right, thank you. Number 3, status, housing element update. Hi, guys.
Chair, members of the commission, Brent Slama again, city's consultant for the housing element 6th cycle. Last time we were here, we've had a couple meetings talking about this. It's been a few months. We want to give you an update of where we are in the process. Kind of big picture, talk about timeline, talk about what we're looking at. We submitted the first draft back in October. HCD provided a nice long letter, which is on the shorter side of what the letter that more cities are getting, but this is about standard 10 pages worth of comments. So if you've had a chance to dive into those, they're very technical speak, but I'll try to simplify this as much as possible to explain what they're looking for and where we're at. Staff, city attorney, we all had a meeting with HCD at the end of January. We're close to returning comments back to go out a second time. AMBAG, all the cities in the AMBAG area, which is Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito County. 2 jurisdictions have a completed housing element right now. That's Santa Cruz and Salinas. So we're kind of right in with everybody else in various rounds of reviews. We've completed our first round of review. Our neighboring cities are actually waiting for their letters still. Gonzales is still waiting to submit their first. So in terms of where we are compared to our other jurisdictions in the timeline, we're doing pretty good compared to our other jurisdictions. If you remember, so in the sixth cycle housing element, we're required to provide sites for 730 units. Of those, 101 are very low income, 66 are low income, 184 are moderate income, and 379 above moderate income. We identified a number of sites, and I kind of want to go over some of the key items that were in the letter, some of the things that they're looking at, and kind of go over any questions that you have about where we are in terms of the whole 180-page document. There were 4 items, and they're lettered A through D in the staff report for you to look at as far as what they wanted. Number 1 was really just a comment on wanting more reporting of our past housing element on accomplishments for special needs. They're spending a lot more emphasis this time around on special need populations, underhoused. There's a section on section D where they just want to know what they want to program for extremely low income individuals. So really going after those that are very marginalized on housing, much more so than in previous cycles. A and D are really not that long. It's really B and C that are the heart of the letter. Section B really goes over a number of items, but I want to kind of summarize them in a group. The first one is the AFFH section, which is affirmatively furthering fair housing. We went over this a couple months ago with you about this is the first time that this has been included in the housing element. And kind of the overall comment they got was in that, and you can read the draft document, it presents a story that Greenfield is much like its neighboring communities in terms of population, demographics, racial composition, economic composition. And then you have a big difference between the communities in the Salinas Valley and the communities in the Monterey Peninsula. And all the graphs and charts show that, and I don't think anyone's surprised by that. And I think some of the information that they wanted was not so much about that story about the divide between the peninsula and the valley, but was more wanting more information within the city itself. What separates the census tracts? We have 3 census tracts in the city, and what makes them different? And the answer to that, there is really not much. There are a few discrepancies here and there that have to do with, some of the homes that were built in the middle of town that are, 70, 80 years old, and some of the homes that are on the edge of town that are maybe 10 years old. There are some income discrepancies that go there. They asked us questions about, for example, transit. So we put this graph in the housing element that showed that all the transit stops that are of consequence are up on the peninsula in the Salinas Valley. We don't have what's considered high quality transit. And they ask questions about, well, what's the difference between transit in the city? And it's like, well, there's only one route that goes through the city. So everyone has to go to El Camino to get to the bus. And it's like, well, we don't know that. And so and I mean, what's obvious to us sometimes is not so obvious to the state reviewers. And so there's a lot of places you'll see once we resubmit this of stating the obvious, I think is the best way to put it. It's obvious to us who live here in this community that no, there's no bus service on 13th Street. There's no bus service on 2nd Street. The bus service is on El Camino, but they want to know how that impacts the entire community. So they're asking questions down to that depth of level. Same thing with our site inventory. So they looked at our site inventory. A couple questions they had about why certain sites were picked, but for the most part, they wanted to really make sure and check our numbers. One of the things we talked about is with 2 sites that we talked about, the EAH project and the self-help project on 3rd Street, that will accommodate all of our very lows and lows for this cycle. And we talked to them about, do we really even need to present any more very low or lows for any of the other sites we proposed out there? And the answer to that is not really. Once you've met your obligations and you were able to prove that those are legitimate sites, which obviously they're under construction, and the other ones approved, and we have all the data that back it up, that we don't have to do that. And so we've refined our tables We did take out one potential site, which was the Green Inn. It was causing a little more problems for us than we needed, and we, quite frankly, having more than enough units for low-income housing just with the projects I mentioned. So we took that out. We do need to add some moderate units. So we have a requirement for 166 moderate units. One of the sites that we're looking at that we did not include in the last analysis, but we've had a lot of talk, is the Franchione property. So the Franchione property, if you recall, was annexed into the city 6 years ago on the east side of US 101, south of Elm Avenue, all the way from Elm Avenue down to the Hearn Building on Espinoza Road. Actually, south of that. All that property, it's part of that's owned by Scheid, part of that's owned by Franchione, was annexed into the city. It was all zoned as industrial and commercial, heavy commercial or highway commercial, and industrial. And I know the property owners are looking for potential uses for that. And one of the things that always comes up is housing. And so there's been a consideration, some plans that have been around for a while about putting housing units out there. So we're looking at that as also a potential site as well to also accommodate the moderate income units, because the other projects that we have are either subdivisions that have already been approved previously, or are infill lots. I think when we took the tour that one time, we talked about lots that are on, that have one farmhouse on 5 acres or one house on 10 acres, that really aren't designed necessarily as affordable projects, but could be. I mean, Elm Terrace is an example of a project that's owned by the Housing Authority that we could put moderate units on, but we need space for the moderate income units because we've got all our lows and very lows covered, and we've got all our above moderates covered, but we needed some sites for some moderates. Other information that they've asked for has been, once again, more data or supporting data above and beyond what we've had in the past for factors such as overpayment, questions about large sites, zoning for lower income households. And that's why I mentioned we took that out and just focused on the 2 sites we already have locked in. Questions about suitability of non-vacant sites. So anything that has a house on it is considered non-vacant. So even if it's one farmhouse, it's a non-vacant site, and you have to show that there's a potential for development there. Either it's for sale or there's been some type of action that suggests that there may be development there. Environmental constraints has also been an issue as well. They wanted also more information on the analysis of government constraints. They wanted some more charts and graphs and things like that, well above and beyond what we've done in the past cycles. So it's been a learning experience, and I think it's been that way for all the communities. Some are on their 3rd, 4th review letters. I mean, it's an interesting process. Under Section C housing programs, this is one that's been kind of tough for us. We have been, as we talk about our RHNA, which is our regional housing needs allocation, and how we've been the top producer of low income housing in the county and in the AMBAG area for years now. This is more about your programs, not so much about the unit counts, but the programs that you have, things like low income programming, first time home buyers, commitments for rehab, commitments for addressing housing complaints, all the programs that you're committing to. And there are a lot of them that you're required to commit to as a function of law, that the state requires that you have a path to address. And so one of the things that the state has been doing is this time around, they've gotten a lot more power. Before it was that you would approve a housing element, that was that. It was certified, that was done. Now they have the power to take that away from you, to uncertify your housing element. I don't anticipate that would ever happen here, compared to considering our track record of housing and all the wonderful things that have been done over the last cycle. But what that means is that what they want to look at is actual commitments in your programs. So in the past, a program would say, the city will look into doing a first-time homebuyers program. Well, city will explore this. The city will look at that. They don't want that anymore. They want to make sure that every program has an identified timeline. So they can say, well, we are going to examine this program by the end of 2025 or something to that. It's like that. That has a firm commitment on it. They don't want wishy-washy stuff in there, which creates some heartburn for the city staff, because We do have some limits on what we can do and what we can focus our energies on, especially considering all the stuff that's required by law and by the state. But these are things we have to do. And they identified, I think, 12, a dozen or so programs that we needed more commitment on that we haven't had those commitments to in the past. And so I've had to work with the staff to say, okay, I'm going to write this in, which means we're committing to this. Do you understand what that means? And what does that look like? So anywhere where there's no defined date or defined action, we have to put something in there that supports the timeline for when we're going to do it. The theory being that if we don't, then they could come back and say, well, you didn't do this, and it's going to matter in 8 years when you review the last housing element. Building the housing is not good enough, apparently. So that kind of goes over what the bulk of that letter is. It's in as few words as possible. The timeline. So we're going to be setting up, I think we have a meeting hopefully at the end of this week or next week with our state reviewer. And then we're giving some draft language to them to make sure that we're on the right page on what we're doing. Once we do that, it goes back out on the website for public review. And then it goes to the state for another 60-day review. We get the letter back. If we like the letter, then we bring it to the planning commission for a formal public hearing, then the recommendation to the city council for a formal public hearing, and then they adopt it, and then we send it to the state for a 30-day certification review. If they don't like it, then we make more edits and go back for a third round. So that kind of gives the update of where we are timeline process. That does put us under what's known as non-compliance. As I mentioned, only 2 AMBAG cities are in compliance right now. Some, like the County of Monterey, haven't even submitted their first draft yet. So it kind of tells you where things are in the process. But what does that do? That limits our ability to get CDBG funding. It also limits our ability on other grants, and it also subjects us to builder's remedy projects. Builders remedy projects are, if you've read in the news, especially in the Bay Area, have gotten a lot more traction. Basically allows developers to come in and basically do something without regard to what your zoning code or your general plan says. So there's definitely a benefit to getting this complete sooner rather than later. I think I talked about that at one of the previous workshops that we had. We don't anticipate any projects like that here, but they definitely are getting a lot of traction up in the Bay Area. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, comments. We'll take anything on the housing element that you want to ask at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're on track.
Yes and no. I mean, from a pure regulatory standpoint, we were supposed to have done on December 15th. As I mentioned, 2 out of the 20 AMBAG jurisdictions have been able to do that. It's just a very tough process that the state is putting everybody through. And you can judge how tough it is just by that letter that we received. For a city that has been overproducing in all areas of our affordable housing.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was expecting an A+ right away on this letter. I thought it was an A+.
Oh, no.
So their letter wants the city to additionally revise our programs to encourage incentives for ADUs, funding for farm worker housing. I mean, we have 9 buildings that are vacant for 3 to 4 months of the year of farm worker housing. What funding do you think they need?
It's a good question. Sometimes it's just, I think it's more filling the box more than anything in terms of what they're looking for. And I've noticed this so many times, like, why don't you just write the element for us? That's how I feel sometimes. You want it this way, just write it for every city that way, or just put it in a state law this way. And then why do we need a housing element? It's more than that, but I'm going to I'm looking right here on page 41 of your agenda, but of the letter. So we've had a program for a long time that's from the past that says that we're looking for potential funding sources. And it's one of those things that they require that you're doing this type of thing. It says the program should be revised to commit to additional proactive actions to facilitate the development and conservation of farm worker housing. It could commit to explore regulatory incentives, or coordinate with employers or other related organizations to explore funding and incentives and identify specific development opportunities. And the program should include measurable metrics or objectives, definitive deadlines, dates, or benchmarks for implementation. This is where in a lot of cases, especially with cities that have been hostile to these numbers, there's been pushback from cities back to state, and this is where you get fourth, fifth letters. So basically what they've said is our program that exists, it says, that checks the box that says we're looking to farm worker housing is not specific enough. And we need more detail on that. Why we should do that and should we do that? I think there's a lot of heartburn from the staff level. And I think in some cases on some of these programs and the specificity and that we're going to do that. And then it comes back to, well, do you want a certified element or not? You need to do this. That's the state is exercising way more control than they ever have in this process. That's the only way I can put it.
I'm really surprised at that, given the fact that nearly every affordable housing development we have has an ag worker, farm worker component to it as a requirement to live there. So, and especially that Avila project. That really surprises me. And then this, what does extremely low income mean? I mean, we've reached our very low and our low, and is this a new one?
So basically you're looking at your 30% of AMI. So AMI is your area mean income, right? You have your low, which is under 80%. You have your very low, which is under 50%. Now you're looking at your extremely low, which is under 30%.
Under 30.
Which depends. So a family of four, if that's 100,000, a family of four that makes under 30,000 would be categorized as ELI. Essentially, people that are sustaining life on minimum wage, poverty level wages, essentially.
And so that's part, I guess, it goes hand in hand with the increased density. That type.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop now.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hughes, Commissioner Gallardo, Commissioner Mendoza.
The further bring fair housing, is that because of the demographics?
So this is the first time this has ever been required to be in the housing element, and it takes up like 50 pages of the 180 pages. It's a huge part of it. The state is, through their policies has been very, very, very proactive on making sure that cities in the past have been insincere in their efforts to produce housing at their housing elements. So this is where jurisdictions have proposed sites that are unrealistic for development in an effort to just say, we really don't want housing at all. And they do that through certain methods. And there's certain communities, Greenfield's not one of those communities. Greenfield's always provided housing well more than the rest of the region. Other communities, not just in the region, but in the state, have been very hostile to any new housing whatsoever. And so they'll put units in places where there's a grocery store. Well, the grocery store might, close, and we could put housing there, even though there's no intention to close the existing building or something like that. The goal of AFFH is to put more housing in areas of affluence. So they've basically they want to put more affordable housing on the Monterey Peninsula and more market rate housing in the Salinas Valley, which sounds great in principle, but in actual reality, it's a very difficult thing to do. That's an example of AFFH. The state at the policy level up in Sacramento is fully committed to this. They want all this information about demographics, income, access to transit, environmental, so some of the issues with pesticides and, the harmful impacts of those, park coverage, trees, access to health, how many times you have to go forever to wait for us, drive an hour to get to a specialist for health services, or wait for that one day a month they come to us. All those things you're looking at, as barriers to opportunity. Economic scores, we all know from an economic scores that we just don't have the retail here that other communities have. So they're looking to find ways to level the playing field, and some communities really don't like that. And so this is really looking at putting in housing, making meaningful opportunities to put affordable housing in affluent places, and to put, more above moderate housing opportunities in places that could use economic development. So, but it's the first time that anyone has had to deal with the AFFH. It wasn't in housing elements before. And so it's been an interesting exercise because it's really mandated by the state. We're kind of, well, what do you want from us? And then we get a letter like this that says, well, you did a really great job, but we want more. That's what it felt like to me anyway.
The AMI, that's countywide, yes?
Yes, so it's on a county-wide basis.
All right, well, thank you for that, Brett.
You're welcome.
I think that's it. Do you have anything to add? No. Oh, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Moving on to number 5, rental registration and inspection program review. Staff review? Staff report, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Tonight, I want to go through what amounts to concepts regarding the residential rental registry / ordinance. It's been a community development department has been reviewing this for about 8 months. We've reviewed 20 ordinances from other cities in California and 2 out of state. These are not that uncommon. What I want to do tonight is outline our approach to bringing forward an ordinance to the Planning Commission and the City Council that's suitable for enactment into our local code. Staff has hosted 4 community outreach meetings in the community in November and December in both Spanish and English to seek input from interested parties, primarily targeting landlords and tenants. So what we're going to go over tonight is really hopefully a paragraph by paragraph review of the concepts. There's 6 sections that really could populate an ordinance that involves the purpose, the scope, and then other tenants up through inspections. At the next Planning Commission meeting, we're also going to review a more difficult part of the ordinance conceptually, which is, we'll get to that in just a moment. Which is a self-certification, how a property owner might self-certify themselves out of the rental registry ordinance. So tonight, overall, we're going to talk about the rationale for the ordinance, the limitations that we hope to apply, and the overall objectives of the ordinance. You'll review it. You'll notice in your staff report in Section A, fairly robust language that hopefully captures the rationale for having the ordinance. Many jurisdictions have entirely disparate reasons for doing this sort of thing. In Bay City, Michigan, as an example, they have an entire department of rental units, and their fee schedule, their inspections, everything is highly geared toward regulating all aspects of the rental housing stock. We don't anticipate being that draconian. However, the findings and purpose is very important because it answers your fundamental question: why are we doing this sort of thing? In among the jurisdictions listed in your staff report that we actually obtained and studied, a number of them are local: Salinas, Monterey, Santa Cruz. Those were our jurisdiction most near Greenfield. Another distinguishing characteristic or concept that 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 is attached with Greenfield's proposal is the inspections. Some of the registration ordinances do not have an inspection component. We believe that given the fundamental purpose, which is really captured in the first sentence of the staff report, and I'll read it because that's probably one of the most important concepts. Why are we doing this? And that is that the language reads that the city council finds and declares that there exists in the city substandard, overcrowded, and or unsanitary residential rental units and dwelling units, the physical condition and characteristics of which violate state and local building, housing, and sanitation codes and ordinances, and render them unfit or unsafe for human occupancy and habitation. So that somewhat strikes with pretty clear language. Conceptually, a rationale, maybe not the only rationale, and perhaps the Planning Commission has some different ideas about this. However, the fundamental root for the request that we explore this involve the city's activity involving overcrowding and some of the more egregious cases that presented significant challenges for city staff. For example, the requirement, state law that requires us to relocate dispossessed residents in situations where they may be living in uninhabitable residential units. So that's the first section that we seek any kind of comments on. The second section involves the scope. What properties are we proposing to affect? And because conceptually, staff has constructed a section that excludes certain properties. ADUs is one. Owner-occupied single-family residential unit is another. If you're a business owner, or if you're owning your property and you're renting it out as your single family, would be exempt. Facilities that are subject to TOT taxes, such as a hotel, motel, would be exempt from the ordinance, or new construction plus 5 years. Certificate of occupancy plus 5 years. We're presuming that having passed the final inspection, that they're not yet uninhabitable. So those are some exemptions that we include in the scope. Once you read it and analyze it any further, again, we're seeking input. If you think that there are other exclusions that might be necessary, we'd like to hear about them before we send a draft ordinance to the city attorney for review, before presenting it to the Planning Commission for a recommendation to the City Council. The third section involves the registration the registration of the properties, the way the ordinance, the draft conceptually, what we're thinking about is after the program is implemented, because we believe that we'll give the community 60 days, the property owners who own rental units, 60 days to register their property for the program. And new units that fit the definition of those who would be subject to the ordinance, same thing, 60 days to register the units with the city. Again, I want to emphasize that in our next planning commission meeting, we're going to construct a self-certification program that will allow a property owner to opt out, basically self-certify their property, because the objective here of the ordinance, again, is not to harass property owners who own rental units. The objective here is to mitigate and hopefully rid the community, if that's possible, of inhabitable structures, properties in our neighborhoods that are overcrowded beyond what is an acceptable standard by housing codes, sanitary codes, and other ordinances. And of course, so this ordinance hopefully will have a deterrent effect. Our objective is that we can eliminate this problem to the extent that's possible. Okay, so like I said, we're going to give the community 60 days to register their property with the city on forms provided by the Community Development Department. Once that occurs, this is really the initial phase. We believe that it will take probably 3 years where for the community to really, for us to really get the data that we need, which is, we believe that and existing data suggests that this could impact as many as 2,200 rental properties in Greenfield in total. And obviously the overwhelming majority of them that are fine properties. Others probably have issues. And the objective, the conceptual objective here is that within 3 years, we have an adequate registration registration database. And as far as the inspections go during the initial 3-year period, it's the intent of in the ordinance that we would only be inspecting those properties that have established violations of the housing code or another code, sanitary code, the housing code, or the building code. Because after the initial 3-year period, the ordinance calls for annual inspections. So the intent would be to have an inspector in, or at least eyeballing a rental housing stock at least once a year, with the assumption that there are no violations that affect the health and safety of residents in those residents. Inspections, excuse me. Frequency of inspections would be 21 days. Property owners would receive a 21-day notice before the city shows up to inspect. Like I said, it's not the intent to become the Gestapo or anything along those lines. So we want to give property owners the opportunity to ensure that their properties are not a nuisance property in the community. That may be too much notice. That's why we're proposing this and to you, that might not be that might not work to achieve our objectives, and that's why we're presenting it conceptually. Now, the fifth component that we wanted to present to the planning commission involved the fee structure. The last thing we want to do is have the community think that here comes the government again, taking more fees to inspect our properties, and that's not what we're trying to do. So we haven't entirely figured out how the fee structure is going to help defray the cost of the program. Obviously, any fees would need to be authorized by the city council and would be well presented in a public process. But some fees will undoubtedly be associated with this effort to cover one inspection and a second re-inspection. And after that, it will probably include language for full cost recovery if it takes more than 2 inspections, because this ordinance also is supplemental to existing requirements in the building code. But what other jurisdictions have found is that that's just not enough. Rental properties, we've had very, very disparate cases where some of the landlords may have owned 40 properties throughout the county, and their properties in Greenfield that may be less than habitable is just something in their portfolio. And that's really not acceptable for us in the community, given the impact that it has on our neighborhoods and things like that. And then we discussed the idea about inspections, the idea ultimately whether it's after the 3-year initial period or whether it's permanently. The idea is to have an inspector ensuring for health and safety purposes that the rental units are habitable at some time frame. And then again, at the next planning commission meeting, we'll talk about concepts for property owners to apply to be self exempt from this ordinance, from inspections, like it's a new property or some other condition that doesn't fit into those 5 variables that are already listed in the scope section. So that basically summarizes the main points in the 6 sections presented tonight to the planning commission. And I'll be quiet and try and answer any questions and record your comments and see how we can incorporate your viewpoints into the ordinance that we're drafting currently.
Thank you. I will open it up for public comments. Do we have any public comments on this item?
No public comments.
Okay. Planning commission discussion and comments. Commissioner Mendoza?
This is a 2-part, where it's a registry and inspection, right? It's not both, not combined.
It would be one ordinance, and the inspection component, commissioner, would be a part of it. Register the property, and then from that registry, we would inspect. An inspector would inspect the residential units.
So a landlord has to register, right? What if he decides not to register? What's the consequences there, if any?
That's a good question. In the staff report, we have it as an infraction. Now, we haven't, obviously, these concepts have been borrowed from other ordinances that have already been enacted and in the language we have presented to the planning commission, we have where the property owner is given notice of an inspection, but there could be a case readily conceivable where a tenant may not permit an inspector inside the premises, and in a case such as that, as it's written now, they would not be in violation in the ordinance quite yet. But we still have to work that through with the city attorney as to what, if any, sanction might exist. Right now, we have it as it would be an infraction if a landlord just said, because that's probably going to happen where a landlord just says, we're not going to do it. And it's going to take a little bit of time, given 2,200 rental units in the city, to really register at all. I would suggest also, however, on a different pivot here to the housing element that you just heard about, the state of California has gotten so aggressive with housing. It's just as you read by that letter that they sent, where they're aggressively enforcing concepts that never before have been included in the housing element process. If nothing else, other than our sincere attempt to try and push back against overcrowding, uninhabitable residences, and otherwise perfectly shootable neighborhoods that have good character. And then there's your one unit that's got 35 people living in it. That's the kind of thing that we're really targeting in this ordinance. But what I wanted to point out is that the residential unit, the state is increasingly demanding to know these metrics, and we don't entirely know these metrics. For example, when we work with Sacramento and the Department of Finance, it's population of Greenfield is 19,000, and that's just what the way it is, because that's what the census says. Well, I can think of a lot of people who say it could be as high as 10,000 more than that. They don't care. Population is 19,000 because that's the government and that's what they say it is. Okay. But when there's, bring that down to a local level when we've got our residences and there's, 10 cars parked in the lawn, we're trying to push back a little bit to against nuisance properties, really, which are the more egregious properties. So the registration of these units by a landlord. One other question that pertains to this question that you asked about, well, what if, also involves the business license aspect of this. This ordinance implies that rental units are a business, and some would argue, well, it is a business to some extent. And so would we want to require property owners who are renting their units to obtain a business license? We don't have an answer for that. It's not in the ordinance, the concept right now. We wanted to bring that up to you and get your thoughts on it, because it begs the question that you were clearly treating rental properties different than home ownership. In the exempted properties, it's a homeowner who's living on their property and is renting out a room. We're not going to be in there wanting to inspect because of that. Your owner, you're living on the property. We don't think that that's really what we're trying to. Well, that's not the problem we're trying to solve here.
So part of this is the overcrowding, right?
Yes, sir.
So
Absolutely.
and obviously if the property is not up to par, Isn't that more of a code enforcement deal than a city deal where we have to go out and have these landlords register?
Uh, I'm, I would say no myself. But again, we're staff and you're decision makers. Code enforcement perhaps, but if you look at the code enforcement career field as an example, many of our code enforcement officers they don't stay in their positions very long. They are trying to become police officers or they go to a different jurisdiction. Most of our code enforcement officers, and I've done this in several other jurisdictions, and they're very hesitant to involve themselves in matters that are the code. They're when I say the code, that's not what I mean. But for example, if you take our own downtown, you walk downtown, you could identify probably 1,000 code enforcement violations, from illegal signs, inventory in the public right of way, fire building, you mentioned that, and the code enforcement officials, they don't know the planning, the zoning code, and that's where a lot of the local laws, that's where those issues live. And I don't know if the city attorney has something to add to that, because you could argue that that's a code enforcement's job. You really could. 20 jurisdictions, including many in Monterey County, have decided that they need to do it through an ordinance. And you could go either way, really.
Commissioner Gallardo?
Mr. Mendoza mentioned something about overcrowding. I forget the numbers, but each individual in a residence is supposed to have X number of square feet. I forget what
120,
that number is.
120 square feet
Okay.
per person.
But I think I'm having a senior moment here. Which I haven't any more often. I think we were told in the past that even if you have too many people in that home, as long as they're relatives, there's nothing you can do about it. Is that true?
That's my understanding of the law, yes.
So you could have a 2-bedroom home and have 22 people in there, as long as they're all related, they're not in violation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that overcrowding issue was out the window. Okay, so maybe I'm moving forward too fast here. But you brought up the issue about the notification to the homeowner, where you're talking about 21 days. Well, in 21 days, they could have a place that's falling apart. And in 21 days, that place could look like a hospital. I think that's too much time to allow them to try to clean things up. I mean, I'd like to see like 7 days, but I don't think that's really feasible, but I would like to see 7 days. As far as the inspections, they should have, God, you're talking about an inspection every 3 years, I think. Did you mention that?
Yes.
That's way out too far. I think, when they register their homes, how long is that registration for? Is there a time limit on that? I mean, does that expire? Do they have to renew their registration or anything like that?
It should be an annual registration, like,
So, an annual thing. Okay.
yes.
Well, maybe they should, no, I don't know. I've seen some of these homes Look, you guys see me on my bike all the time, right? I pass by some of these homes and they're like falling apart. I mean, just in the area where I live. And it's unfortunately, I mean, it's like you mentioned that about the code enforcement officers that perhaps they don't know all the codes,
Yes, the building code, the
Yeah,
state law,
but
the sanitary.
I mean, the obvious ones, right? And I'm not saying they're not doing what they're supposed to do, but maybe they're not doing it to the extent they're supposed to do. I mean, one of the ones that really sticks out in my head, and it's maybe insignificant to everyone else, which is where you see cars parked on lawns or where there used to be lawns. I mean, I know the code says you're not supposed to park in the dirt. And I mean, that's everywhere. You look everywhere. I mean, just in my area, there's gotta be at least 15, 20 cars that are parked where their lawn used to be. I mean, that's a violation, but, and again, I'm not trying to make code enforcement look bad, but they drive right by there. So then what's in sense having codes if you're not gonna enforce them? Right? I mean, and then I think it's gonna come down to like this thing with the registration of the homes. Who's gonna enforce it? Are they gonna take the time to actually go out and say, well, we need to look at your house? You know, and, yeah. Is code enforcement gonna enforce it, or is the building inspector gonna do it? I know they've done in the past. So I mean, that's something that needs to be discussed. And, yeah. So. That's my 10 cents worth, my 2 cents was free.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. And, you know, just for Mr. Mendoza's, or Commissioner Mendoza's, just to clarify that this is in response to, I think it was 8 months ago, the complaints that came forward about overcrowding. So this is how we started talking about this process, and then Salinas implemented one, and then I think Monterey did too. So this is just the new way of things. I'm concerned about the scope provisions. I feel like we're creating loopholes for people, and I don't know about you, but I always look for a loophole. I don't know if it's because I work in the legal field, but I can always find them. And so the first off, the ADUs are being exempted. So 15 people can have 15 cars because they live in an ADU. I think that's a loophole that has potential for abuse. And then also you're exempting newly constructed multiple dwelling units. So existing ones are not exempt, so they should register like apartment buildings.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And so it seems like this, I'm trying to picture how this is all gonna come together, but it seems like is this gonna be on the honor system? Are we gonna put out a notice that, hey, if you're a landlord, you need to register? And if they don't, how are we gonna know? Do we have those metrics of what house is actually a rental and what isn't?
It will take a lot of research, yeah. We have tools that we can use. We'll have to vet it with legal counsel, make sure that we're not violating anybody's rights and
Right.
so forth.
So the self-certification opting out provision, that applies to the inspection, not the registration.
It would apply to the inspections,
Okay.
but not the registration, correct? They would still need to register.
So I don't. Again, with the loophole thing, I think that there should be some language in there that, if you have a problem property that is being complained about over and over, I think maybe some language absent complaints or something could be implemented in there because, if I was a landlord, I'd like to be able to opt out of that if I had a, if I kept my property. But if it's a problem and my neighbors are calling on me because I have 30 cars on the lawn, then I shouldn't be exempt from that.
For what it's worth, that was the goal. We might not have captured that in the concepts, but that's conceptually what we're trying to get to.
And I kind of agree with Commissioner Mendoza that a lot of this is code enforcement. So maybe that can be worked into this ordinance somehow. And lastly, on the fees, is there a fee structure that's governed by statute? Or is this something that we're just gonna make up?
It would be from a fee ordinance.
I know a lot of fees are statutory, so I was just curious.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So this particular fee isn't statutory, but in general, all fees have to be no more than the cost to actually perform the inspection or provide whatever service the city is providing. So there's a cost recovery component. So I think Paul really alluded to this, but the amount of the fee will be the approximate amount to actually perform an inspection, no more than that.
I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Urquidez.
Yes, excuse me. Who's going to be responsible for the inspections? Is it going to be the city or the state or the county?
The city,
The city. So you would have to hire more inspectors to perform those duties.
most likely. Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
And then say an inspector goes into a house and finds all kinds of all kinds of things that need to be fixed and stuff like that. How many days do they give them to do that?
Well, I think it would depend, of course, first of all, it really would depend on what we're talking about. I can envision where health and safety issues could be very serious problems. And we've had cases where the residents had to be relocated because of unsanitary rodents, entirely uninhabitable conditions. So that subjects the city to our relocation ordinances. We will have to enact some specific regulations about how we go about relocating residents. For example, we need to go to the city council with estimates as to how much that will cost, because the cost for such relocation activities attaches to the property owner. And it becomes, Mr. Khadija, I can tell you, if you're suggesting that this is a labor-intensive effort, my brain's been in twisters trying to figure out and visualize how is this really going to work. That said, we're also the same department who fields phone calls from neighbors who have complaints like, look, our neighbor is urinating in the front yard next to, and on and on and on. And what's happening is the house is so full, they don't have bathroom facilities to accommodate the amount of people in there. And you know that because they have 10 cars on the lawn. And it's that kind of egregious health and safety conditions that can only hurt our community. And, this is an attempt to do something about these egregious conditions. We're talking about a lot of inspections, unless, of course, the landlords who are using properties in Greenfield as a little part of their investment portfolio, unless they clean up their act. And that's really what we want to see happen. We would prefer that everybody can self-certify out of the ordinance. That would be ideal.
And one other thing, Commissioner Gallardo brought up the idea of maybe 7 days notice. I would say no more than 10 days would be satisfied, because 21 days, you could rebuild that house in 21 days,
I know.
especially if you got 20 people living in that house. So, I mean, and one other thing is I got a better taste with code enforcement is because I don't know how many times I reported and called and everything because of these junk cars being in the driveway. And you can see they're all wrecked and covered up and stuff like that. But the code enforcement officers are not doing their job. They're not doing their job. So I yield to the chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, can I ask one more? Sorry, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
What happens to those complaints when they do call? Right now,
Well, it depends what the complaint is.
if they're outside urinating, and what happens there? Do they go and does this code enforcement go and inspect it? Inspect the property there? No?
Yes, either the building official and staff either goes out or it's referred to the code enforcement staff. I don't know if I should share an anecdote that goes back 15 or 20 years since we're all friends here, but no, we've had staff meetings. This goes, nobody involved in this is here today. Nobody. We had the chief of police. We had the complaint was, hey, the basketball guys are just kind of whipping it out and they're urinating in the park in front of, families, children, doesn't matter. Chief of police at the time said, there's nothing we can do about that. It's not a crime. So it wasn't left right there, but to some extent, performance inside the city is driven by who sits in these chairs as staff. And of course, that is a crime. It might be a small crime, I don't know what it is, but it is a crime.
Indeed.
You're not allowed to just go and do that kind of behavior in a public park. But we have to have willpower among staff to do something about it. So it's a joint building and code enforcement activity, this type of a problem. The overcrowding is a little bit different. We can go and plain view, we can see things that may or may not be happening. And when that happens, we can red tag the property, we can do things about it. But it becomes extraordinarily legally. Lawyers are very involved. The law is across the country. Property owners have difficulty with squatters who are squatting on property, and it becomes a pretty complicated legal problem. So, again, the purpose of this ordinance is to simply try and push back against the egregious overcrowding that creates. The most egregious case, I can't get into the details, but I can tell you the most egregious fact in this situation was that the 15-day-old baby was living in squalid conditions along with 15 other minors in this one house that was no larger than 1,500 square feet. That place is demolished today. But that was in, our neighborhoods that are otherwise neighborhoods of high character. And this is the kind of reports and situations that leads. I mean, city council are looking for this ordinance and my boss is asking, hey, where's the ordinance? And it's a very challenging thing to nail down these details. And I think that it's something that is going to change over time. I think what we start with on Monday, by Thursday, it might look a little different after we work with it and get some results and try and clean up some of these properties.
And as far as day notice, 21 days, I mean, I don't think that matters, right? Because we're not trying to bust them, are we? I mean,
Well,
if they-
actually,
21 days, they can fix it. That's the ultimate goal, right? To make it.
yes, that's the rationale that it's 21 days. Yeah, we're really not trying to bust people. We're trying to fix the problem. But that is a lot of days though. And you know, we have some of the landlords in the egregious situations, you know, they don't live here. Their properties are one of a portfolio of dozens. And I beg to say they don't really care. Because if they did, their properties wouldn't be in this kind of condition, and which leads to the other part of this problem that somebody's making a lot of money and exploiting people in a fashion that ought not be happening anywhere. And for a city like ours, who has exceeded our arena production by hundreds of %, we should do better. We can do better.
Can do a follow-up question?
Sure.
Once a landlord registers their home, can they deny you access for inspection? Will they be able to?
I don't think if it's in the ordinance, they can. Maybe.
I know you guys.
Search and seizure.
haven't gone. I haven't
No, I mean, once, they don't, I mean, once this is an ordinance, then this is the law. So the registry and the inspection is the law. And so the property owner is required to allow access. I mean, they're required to receive adequate notice. So whatever that might be, you know, we wouldn't write the ordinance to require 24-hour notice. We want to make sure the city provides adequate notice, but once this is in place, it's the law, so they're required to comply. So then they would be, if they didn't allow access, they'd be subject to any of the penalties that anyone is subject to for violating the city's code. So it could be an infraction or it could be an administrative citation. And if you have enough infractions, those become a misdemeanor and could become a felony. So there's definitely consequences.
Through the chair, I have one more comment.
Oh.
Well, we're in the beginning, we're crafting something. So I just think that, you know, going off of Commissioner Mendoza's comment that we're not out to bless people. I think that, you know, this should have mitigation, you know, a mitigating approach. Like, okay, here we have this problem, you know, just to include some more mitigation factors to present to people.
Commissioner, are you saying if you need to correct by such and such or
Yeah, and that
else?
brings back the code enforcement board, you know, that's something that they should be able to, you know, go over, maybe.
Well, as often as we hear complaints about code enforcement, I get really nervous about it because we meet with them and, you know, they're working so hard and everything. It's like, well, I don't know where are the results?
I hear
I
you.
don't know.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so I want to say I have a little bit of knowledge when it comes to property management and inspections. And I will say that I do agree with Commissioner Mendoza. I think 21 days is a good amount of time for, you know, residents or landlords to fix the problem, whatever it is. We're not trying to catch you on something. That's not really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make it a safe place for not only the people living in their homes, but their neighbors. So I think 21 days is a good amount of time to fix whatever the issue may be. I do think that a yearly inspections would be okay. We go through yearly inspections and that seems to work. And I think it's all about educating the community. So it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. 8 years later, it's still it takes time. So I don't know if we can add workshops and just let the community know what we're looking for. And we don't I just don't want residents to feel like they're scared that we're going to come by and to see who's living there. You can't really tell someone who can live there or not, if it's as long as it's a safe environment, like I said, for the residents and the neighbors. So let me see. Oh, the fees what are the other city, like Salinas, do you know what they're charging, their registration fees are?
I don't recall exactly. I don't remember. That will be brought back in a significant form. We haven't really researched that, in terms of putting it together. We weren't sure really what the decision makers really expect out of this. Like I said, Bay City, Michigan, and this is a Bay City is, I know that community, and it's a very it's an anti-government type of place in Michigan. So we're all like government all that well, and they have an entire department dedicated to this effort, and it seems to work over there. And I've been amazed when I talk to them about how it works, because their permits are very inexpensive, and they can last for 3 years. So the residents don't feel like they're being harassed.
Right, yeah.
And the fees are nominal. And they pull it off, but they have a whole rental registry department. And I don't think we're looking at that kind of scope for us. We would hope to do it with the existing staff that we have. We don't want to hire a whole bunch of new staff to do this either, because then you get into what's our point? Are we trying to generate code enforcement revenue? No. Code enforcement fines is not city revenue. So we want to stay focused on what really the problem that we're trying to address here really is.
I also wanted to mention that, code enforcement obviously has a lot to do with it. And I bet it's hard for them, they have to enforce the rules, but someone has to do it. And I feel like accountability, code enforcement and landlords. So just wanted to point that out there. But that's it. Anyone else has anything else to add? All right, I lost my agenda.
H.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to H, comments from planning commission and staff. Does anyone have any? Yeah.
I just want to thank you guys for allowing us to go to the Planning Commissioners Academy. We're going to leave tomorrow. I appreciate you dipping into your budget to allow us to attend that. I'm really looking forward to it and I hope to bring back a lot of good information. Thank you.
Vice Chair Hughes, any final comments?
The same here. Look forward to that academy. One thing I wanted to ask you, is it okay to record in there what they're saying?
Yeah, unless they have some rule that you're not allowed to, there's no reason I.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause I can't write
Yeah,
very well, so I gotta have some note, I have to have take notes.
yeah, you might ask them if their permission,
Yeah, I will.
but.
Okay.
Commissioner Gallardo?
Yeah, I have one request. You know, like today I came all dressed up, ready to take my photo. Dude, I was looking like sharper than, I don't want to say what, but I was looking good. And then I get to over here and the door's locked. So then I called Evelyn and she says that you sent an email out. Well, I don't know how you people deal with emails. I don't read my emails every day. I'll go, 4 or 5 days without reading email. So in the future, when we get notifications, could you text them to us also? I read my
Call.
texts.
Or call?
I read my texts a lot. So would that be asking too much of you? To text us notification?
I mean, that's fine by me if Paul agrees, but that would have to be through Evelyn, because Evelyn's the one with the work phone. So, if you all like, we can go ahead and maybe start setting that up. I mean, of course, I'll still email, but maybe I can request Evelyn to send a text to everyone.
How do you feel about that? Would you prefer to get a text as well as an email? No, I don't.
It doesn't matter.
I'll go days without reading my email, so.
The notifications for your email, if we could help you with that also, like it'll just notify you like a text message, because I have a few emails and I don't check every single one every day also. So like the notifications can be really helpful also. But if a text works, we'll make it work.
So is that a yes?
We'll make it work, yes.
Grazie, mille grazie.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Email works for me, so yeah, I'm the opposite, text message I don't read, but yeah, email. Unfortunately, I won't be making it this week. I have prior engagement, so hopefully whoever's going can share some good information.
All right, with that being said, meeting adjourned at 8:13. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a lot of things on my plate.
What is it? For baseball? No, because I missed it. You know, I have to.
Looking good, I would say.
I'll see you have the.